Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tech and Culture Speaker Series. My name is Marcus Webb, and I'm the Economic Inclusion Fellow here at Center State CEO, and I'll be moderating tonight's event. Before we get started, I wanted to say thank you to JPMorgan Chase for sponsoring this event and sponsoring a lot of the work that we're doing around diversifying tech here in Central New York. This JPMorgan Chase grant has allowed us to bring in, diverse speakers from around the nation to really talk about, how they're making change in tech. And more importantly, telling their stories in hopes to really inspire and motivate the audience, whether you're already established or you're looking for a new career. It's definitely a great program to come to just to learn more from diverse speakers. So again, thank you, JPMorgan Chase, for sponsoring this event. I also wanted to go over a few quick ground rules. All participants should remain muted for the first half of the event. This event is currently being recorded, and it will be posted on the Generation Next social media page, as well as the Center State CEO page. So, if you came and you really enjoyed what the speaker is, presenting, then you can refer a friend, or you can go back and, watch the recap on the Center State CEO website. The chat will be open for any comments or questions that you have throughout the event, but we will not get to those until the end of the event. And lastly, we will be sending out a survey just to follow up and make sure we're getting all of your feedback based on, what you heard during the event, so we can incorporate that into future programming going forward. So without further ado, let's meet our speaker. We have Kelsey Davis, the CEO and founder of Collective. Kelsey is a huge, big-time entrepreneur. She's also a fellow Syracuse University graduate, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about, how she created her business, what her business is about, and how she's currently, living out her dreams. So before we get started, Kelsey, did you have anything you wanted to say to the audience?
No, what's up, everyone? Super excited to be here, talking to the Syracuse family, and yeah, excited to be here.
Happy to have you.
Yeah. Feel free to ask questions, hop in the chat. Let's have some fun.
All right, let me pull my questions up. So Kelsey, I know a lot about you, but do you mind telling the audience a little bit about where you're from and what it was like growing up in your hometown?
Yeah, for sure. So my name's Kelsey Davis. I'm the founder and CEO of Collective. Prior to starting Collective, or a portfolio platform that connects creators to their next opportunity. Prior to starting that, I myself was a full-time freelance content creator, producing visual content for global consumer brands like Coca-Cola, Land Rover, Puma, all while I was a full-time student at Syracuse. Actually. And so that was kind of my introduction kind of into this content space. I'm originally from Georgia, from a small town called Kennesaw, which is north of Atlanta. And yeah, I just grew up kind of at the intersection of like media and business. My family was kind of in the space. In high school, I just really learned the ins and outs around video production. I was super involved in the YMCA and was able to start contracting with them and just learning how to invoice and how to contract, all that stuff. So that by the time I went to Syracuse and I went to Newhouse, I really already had a lot of the hard skills developed around production and film. And I was really more so looking at how do I scale things from a business level, entrepreneurially. And so that's kind of what made me want to go to Syracuse, go to Newhouse. But yeah, I'm from Georgia originally, and yeah, that's a little background on me.
Appreciate it. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience at SU?
Yeah, man. Experience at SU. So, I mean, even looking at the chat, what's a freelancer? Freelancer is just someone who gets paid to work independently, right? So, anyone who uses their independent trades or skills that they have in order to, provide income for themselves. It is SU's birthday. Shout out to that. I think it's 152 or 151 years, and it is National Orange Day. And Syracuse is in the tournament, Sweet 16 on Saturday. So yes, good stuff. But yeah, so that's a freelancer. And then how did I get connected to brands like Puma, Pepsi? A lot of stuff just through my own personal network, through just kind of trying to hustle. I'm from Atlanta, so I kind of grew up just like learning how to figure it out. And I think taking that type of like mental model, but then taking it into the context around something like film, I just use those same approaches towards just kind of like hustling and try to, whether being on LinkedIn, just trying to talk to people. But yeah, my experience, Marcus, to go back to your original question, I'm trying to like hop through the chat while I'm talking.
Yeah.
But yeah, as my experience at SU was incredible. It's everything that I could have expected and more. I ended up being in Syracuse for 5 years. The first four getting my undergrad in television, radio, and film, and my minor degree in innovation design and startups. And then I spent that final year getting my master's of entrepreneurship while we were building out the product and getting that at first like initial capital to actually do this full time, and move to LA and all that stuff. And so yeah, my Syracuse experience was great. I did everything from Greek life to starting a company to making sure that I still had fun on the weekends to going to sports games. Like I don't know, like I just had a very holistic experience, and that was just something that was super super important to me collegiately. I was originally on the pathway to play Division One sports, and so I was originally supposed to be a D1 athlete to play basketball, and I kind of could have went really anywhere I wanted to go for that. But I think unfortunately, or yeah, fortunately or unfortunately, I knew that even though I was super skilled at it, I didn't really feel like that was my calling. I didn't feel like that was my purpose. I was like, yes, I could put a ball in the hoop and that's great, but I feel like I could do so much more. And I kind of just wanted college to be a time where I could figure that out, and to have a safe space to fail and just like a playground to kind of play with different toys and tools, and just learn along the way. And so Syracuse being a research institution, having a school like Newhouse and me being interested in content, but more so a more innovative entrepreneurial approach to it, I think that provided the perfect environment. And then also I was somebody, and Marcus will tell you this, I was somebody who spent most of my time off of the hill instead of on it. And I was just always just like in the community and just trying to really actually be I don't know, being a member of Syracuse and not just a student of the university. And that was just something that was super important to me. And I think something that also just enabled me to actually end up building what I built, because ultimately our goal was to be able to actually democratize the job market and the recruitment market when it came to giving opportunities to people who were super skilled and capable, but maybe they just didn't have certain access to certain classes or opportunities. And so I think, for me being a member of the community and a servant of the community, I think just made that a great natural progression. But I'll shut up. But yeah, Syracuse was cool, and I had a great time. And holistically, I think it definitely poured in everything that I needed to now be doing what I'm doing now.
See, to build upon what you just said, it seems like there's a disconnect between, the city of Syracuse and Syracuse University. So what makes a student like yourself come off the hill and go into the city and explore?
Is there a disconnect between the city of Syracuse and the university? That's new. No, I'm just playing. I'm just messing with you. But yeah, no, I definitely, I don't know, man. Like, I've always been like, I come from a servant leadership background, in terms of just like, how I learned, like leadership and the way to show up for that. Like I grew up in Georgia, Bible Belt. I grew up in like Chick-fil-A Leaders Academy and like YMCA leadership camps and like stuff like that. And so I think for me, learning about like John C. Maxwell and what does it look like to, yes, be this business person, but to do it in a way that is like serving people, where it's like an upside down triangle, or it's like, even if you're at the top, like in reality, like you're serving everyone who's like under you. And so in reality, like you're at the bottom and like you're serving everyone up. And so, yeah, that was just kind of the philosophy I kind of grew up around. And I think growing up in the YMCA, I just saw the importance of like how community shapes the impact of people's success at the individual level. Also, I myself come from Kennesaw, Georgia, which is like one of the most racist cities on paper, in the United States of America. And so I think I always just grew up with this kind of like dichotomy, and I always had to have a higher level of consciousness when it had to come to like how I'm communicating with people and just having empathy for people and being conversational and knowing how to just kind of be like water and being able to operate in a lot of different spaces, and to be successful in doing that but still comfortable in my own skin and identity. And so, yeah, I think a lot of that just has to do with being able, and willing to like be a people person. And I think a lot of times entrepreneurs, they try to just be these big famous people that like start these companies and do these things, but they're so disconnected from the people. And it's like, how can you actually create these companies and scale these and sell this to your customer, but you don't actually even know the pain points of your customer. And so, yeah, it's just always super important for me to just like be a local person, no matter how large or whatever things get. And I think in Syracuse, you know, I'm 1,000 miles away from home also in Atlanta. And, you know, while Syracuse University was great, I think there were certain things that I valued from people and just in my life that the university maybe did not give me directly, but that the city of Syracuse did, and the people of Syracuse did. Uh, so yeah, I like that.
I see. So, how did you become an entrepreneur? How did you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, I kept seeing myself unsuccessful at jobs, and like I was a person who like in school, like I wasn't good at school traditionally. I was not great at any of my like those like entry level jobs. Like I was like a cashier in high school and like just different things like that. I was so bad. Like I'm not good with like just like showing up on time and doing the whole like clock in and like just these systems and walking a straight line and like I don't know, man. It's like I like what's the high level goal or what's the problem, and then let me like play around with it and like get my hands dirty and break things and hire people who are smarter than me and like do things collaboratively. And I understand how that um way of life maybe is not super scalable for like any and every employee to be like operating as within an organization, which makes sense. I would never want to hire people that operate the way that I do, right? But I think the benefit of that is that there's a world within work professionally that does support that behavior. And that is where entrepreneurship and I met. And so I think, you know, originally when I came to Syracuse, like I was a film major in Newhouse. I wasn't an entrepreneurship like minor or anything like that. But then over time, once I started realizing, okay, I'm super interested in film, but I don't want to be a director. I don't want to go and be a producer. I don't want to go graduate and work for NBC or like, you know, do any of those like stereotypical Newhouse jobs like fresh out of school. But I knew I was super interested in the space and just knowing the way that kind of the digital economy was moving. I'm like, most of these jobs aren't even going to exist by the time I graduate from college. And like, we don't even know what space we're getting into. So like, I'm not going to study some specific vertical. Like, let me just understand the space overall and then understand innovation deeply enough to then be able to build the future. And that sounded a lot cooler to me and more exciting and something that I was willing to go to class for, honestly, and like willing to like stay up in the library about and like study deeper. And because I felt like it was this new space that I was creating or learning or getting into. And so then at that point, once I knew that from just the intrinsic interest level, that was what I was interested in. That's then when I declared my minor in innovation design and startups. And then that's when I started learning things from an entrepreneurship standpoint more tactically and started learning about technology and product development
Mhm.
and all that.
Super dope. So, you come to SU, you do your 5 years here, and then you make a big move to LA. Can you tell us a little bit about how that, change of location impacted your life?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I don't know if I have a vitamin D deficiency anymore. So that's cool. But yeah, nah. So the way it kind of worked was basically we were building the company in Syracuse. I had originally decided to stay another year in Syracuse. And Marcus, I think you knew this at the time. When I made that decision, I didn't know that I wanted to get my master's yet, and I wasn't pursuing that. I think I just fell in love with the city of Syracuse. I just wanted to stay, understanding what we were building. It just made sense to stay there economically. And so that's just what I wanted to do. And then in that process, I was like, hey, well, why don't I just go back to school in that process and just stay connected to the university while I'm living in the city of Syracuse? I think as we started to continue to build the company and we started looking for stuff like venture capital, we started thinking about, okay, how are we actually scaling this? What does it look like for us to take our product into the market? Where do we want to be in relation to that? Also, I had a co-founder who was about to graduate, and we didn't think about, okay, where do we want to live to build this? He's from New Jersey. I had just spent 5 winters in Syracuse. And so we knew that we wanted to get away from tundra environments. And so I think beyond there, it was okay, where does it make sense from a market level to build? And we were thinking about Austin or Atlanta or LA. And I think LA just made sense based on what we were trying to do. And then as we started talking to investors, the lead investor who came on board ended up being Techstars out of LA. And so we figured that would be a perfect transition for us from like the university into the LA market in a way that was still based around community. And they have just a very great community accelerator program and an environment to really just help startups succeed. And then they also have a partnership with the Blackstone Launchpad, which is where we spent majority of our time in Syracuse, building our company. Was in the Blackstone Launchpad at the university. And so knowing that they had that relationship, I think that just felt great. And yeah, then we came out to LA, and Marcus and I were kind of talking about this a little bit earlier, but I think it's just great being able to, wake up, go to the beach, be in work meetings, like be outside. There's just a certain level of efficacy around, I think, work-life balance that I think is a lot easier to obtain for maybe a 24-year-old building a tech company in LA. So it's been okay.
Living, man. So I'm sure everyone on this call, heard of Collective or they've seen it somewhere because it's blowing up. But just give us, a breakdown, some background. You kind of did already, but break it down for us. What is Collective?
Yeah, for sure. Essentially, what we're trying to build in the simplest form is a LinkedIn for creators, right? When we think about creators, freelancers, people who do work like photography, videography, graphic design, animation, it's often hard for these people to kind of communicate who they are and what they do in a super digestible way. If you send someone your LinkedIn and you're a videographer, that LinkedIn account probably doesn't really justify or articulate really who you are as a videographer. And when you think about something like a resume, that doesn't really capture that experience holistically either. And so what we're building is a portfolio platform and a portfolio tool that enables freelancers to be able to build their world online through our platform. And so they can come on here, add their skills, their interests, add all their content, connect their social media accounts, and really have this place that becomes like their link in bio for creators. So it's a super digestible way for them to communicate who they are and what they do and share that with employers. And then also on this platform, they have the ability to connect directly with brands by participating in brand challenges where they can actually, submit their content to brands, win cash prizes, rewards. So yeah, ultimately we're trying to build a tool that better connects creators and brands and ultimately democratizes kind of this creator economy approach to kind of allow any and everybody to be able to have opportunities like I did, being able to work for a lot of these bigger brands. But if you don't know Pepsi, you can't find them, you can't work with them, right? So how do you actually bridge that gap and create those connections to happen in one place, in one environment? Yeah.
I see. So what inspired you to start it? You kind of explained that too, but was it the fact that there wasn't a platform like this around, or was it a different reason? Like what exactly, if you can put your hand on it, inspired you to start it?
Yeah, and I'm gonna share my screen while I talk, just because I prefer to do that. Just kind of show you guys the product even while I do it. But yeah, I don't know. Just I think again, in looking at how are people actually being able to connect, especially in a pandemic environment, right? You have all these people who are super talented and super skilled, right, and super capable to fulfill a lot of these jobs. But oftentimes it's really just a mismatching issue, right? It's really just person A can't connect with person B. Person A doesn't even know that person B exists. Person A maybe is super talented and qualified, but maybe they didn't know how to build a website. Maybe they don't, have connections to an engineer to be able to build this thing out for them to be able to have a better way of communicating who they are and what they do. Maybe they're just a really great designer and they just want to focus on designing, right? Like, how do we streamline that on-ramping process to be able to enable them to do that? That was just really the goal. And I was somebody who was a creator kind of in this space, trying to find opportunities. I was successful at the individual level, but I saw a lot of gaps that existed, right? I saw a lot of gaps and issues on the creator end as well as on the brand end, right? And so I think, again, the cool part about entrepreneurship is that we get to solve those problems, right? I'm able to say, hey, like I see these issues as a creator. If I were an employee or if I, weren't in the context of being an entrepreneur, like I would maybe just have to kind of submit to those issues or maybe report those issues up to my boss, right? Or I could be like, yo, like, F it, I want to fix this, and let's build a company for it and let's only think about this issue and let's like micro focus on that and then build a technology solution that makes it like easier and better. So yeah, this is like the product, and you can kind of see it's like, again, you could think about it kind of like LinkedIn, but that more creative interpretation. Creators are able to also kind of search through here. They're able to connect with and find other creators. They're able to embed their website directly onto the platform. And they're able to, look at challenges, which are launched by these brands. Um, so yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
Cool. So where do you see yourself, and let's say not yourself, where do you see Collective as a brand in, let's say, 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, our goal at that point in 2 to 3 years would be ideally we're coming off of like our Series A, or at least moving into a point where like we're really starting to hit ideally at least around a good like 5 to 10 million in annual revenue. We're in a position where from an employee standpoint we have anywhere between like you know 25, 30 employees. And yeah, ideally being able to really just shape the future of work for like this specific next generation of creators. I think when we look at the creator economy overall, like it's on the pathway towards booming, right? We see all these people on TikTok, IG, right, who are blowing up. You see all these Gen Z kids who are realizing like, oh wait, like maybe I can be a creator. I have the capacity to actually have this skill in this trade that's a commodity that people will pick up and buy. And I can create my own likeness and identity as an individual. And I myself can maybe even be the product, right? And so, yeah. And so our goal is to basically be that leading platform that's enabling kind of this next generation of creators to be able to have this utility and tool to be able to showcase who they are and what they do better. Um, yeah.
See, I see. So you've been working with a lot of big companies, and you mentioned a few, Google. I seen you were featured in Forbes, New York Times. First of all, as a person, how does that make you feel? I know you're probably used to it by now, but that's still big stuff, man. Like that's dope. So
No, I mean it's cool. But yeah, it's like I mean Forbes doesn't cut you a check, you know what I mean? Like it's like you still have work to do. I think, those types of things are great. But I think if anything they're like affirmations, right? They're it's kind of like, these like checkpoints when you're like going along the way, like all right, like I can get my head above water today and like be like, all right, we're on the right, pathway. So I think, I definitely need to do better in like actually celebrating the wins and all that stuff. But it definitely doesn't, deter anything in a negative or positive way from a stand. You know what I mean? Like it's like, yo, like this is great. I'm glad that we're getting this affirmation. Um, let's continue to bring users onto the platform, and how are we making sure that we're getting closer to product market fit, and not just getting kind of caught up in those accolades and awards as much as using them as validation for what we already kind of know and believe, which is this like hypothesis that we've created. How can we get people, yes, like Forbes, New York Times, to be able to come in and say, hey, like, I co-sign this, like that feels great and incredible, because that then helps then the next investor or the next person to come in and feel more comfortable. And I think, my job as a CEO really is just to de-risk the company, right? How could I create de-risk factors to enable investors to come in, or employees to come in, or brands to come in, right? Like that's kind of just the main job of the CEO, is to de-risk. So things like Forbes and New York Times help me de-risk, which is
see.
great.
Yeah. So just to pivot a little bit, you know, being an entrepreneur is already tough, but there's added pressure of being a black and even more a female or a woman, entrepreneur. So what are some challenges that you face given those circumstances?
Yeah, man. I mean, we live in America though, right? So I don't know. I think my experience as a Black American and as a female American have equipped me, right? Arguably more so,
Mhm.
to be prepared, right? To operate in this type of space, right? To face things like adversity, right? To know how to, face challenges when they come up, to know how to do more with less resources. Like that is the Black experience, right? Like that is the female experience. And so I think if anything, like me, I think growing up in a city like Kennesaw, kind of already having to know how to double down on W's, like without, I think just puts me in this position to be comfortable while still existing in that reality. Right. So I think when we look at the venture capital space, a lot of these stereotypes that exist and, terrible data stats and whatever in the context of just American society double down like 10x when we're talking about the venture capital space, right? And so I think if anything, that just makes me kind of have to be able to make sure, like, all right, like we're on our p's and q's, like when we're in this pitch meeting, like we know what we're talking about, we're there, and just being able to continue to perform. I think that's something that, performance and execution has never been the issue. And so I think just making sure that we're continuing to understand how to occupy and own the spaces that we exist in comfortably. As long as they're safe environments and there's not like an immediate threat, I generally feel comfortable in any environment. I don't really care what your beliefs are. I don't really care like what your background is. Like, if you're here to learn, we're here to do business. Like, let's do it. And I really don't care who you voted for or anything. Like, it's really cool. How are you providing value to my community? How are we like, and are you hurting my community? Right. And so those are things I care about, and we could work together and we could build. And I think if anything, they often are kind of even like shocked by that. And there's often like even this like, I've seen myself in certain meetings and they try to like, present themselves in one way, having a presumption of how you are going to be and respond. And then I think when I speak and I kind of, let them know that like, yo, like I clearly see you dancing around here. Like, I think if anything, they feel stupid, right. And you feel comfortable and they see you feeling comfortable. And that makes them feel like, oh, snap. Like, all right, well, let's give her money, So I don't really care what your opinions are if you're still willing to commit and take a step back, honestly, right? Because that's what we all have to do in entrepreneurship. It's like being willing to humble ourselves and admit when maybe we don't know anything or we have all the answers. So as long as other people are willing to do that, especially in the context of understanding different people's identities or preferences, backgrounds, like, then, we could work.
Oh, sad. So, Kelsey, because you work with us pretty closely, that we're trying to do a lot of work around diversifying tech. So from your perspective, how important is diversity in tech and entrepreneurship and things along those lines?
Yeah, I think diversity in tech is super important because the whole goal of tech is scale, right? So if we're starting from something that's small and maybe it's not super diverse, maybe we're not prioritizing too much because we know we'll get to diversity eventually and whatever, right? But on a day-to-day, we're focused on high growth, high scale. Then we're going to wake up one day and we would have scaled the shit out of something that we never prioritized diversity from the beginning, right? And so as it's scaling, it's getting more dangerous. As it's scaling, it's getting less mindful. As it's scaling, it's getting less considerate of cultures, identities, whatever, right? And so I think for me, it's about how are we prioritizing things like culture, diversity, inclusion, like all of that from the beginning. And also not building it as a sidecar silo next to the organization, but really actually creating that like within the essence and ethos of who we are, right? And so, yeah, from a team level, like whether it comes to like, racial identities, like age identities, like sexual identities, like spiritually, politically, like we have a radically diverse team. And I think that's just super important also just in the context of what we're building. And yeah, I think also just in tech, I think it's really cool that we have a predominantly African-American product team, which is super dope to me, just because that's not really a common reality, but there's like so many talented Black tech people. And so I think also it's really cool in my role to be able to just like, I always am connected to super talented like tech people of color. But like oftentimes they're not then connected to people who are just like founders and CEOs of tech companies, right? So like I think it's pretty cool that like I have the ability to be like, yo, like we're looking for engineers, like I'm trying to find some Black engineers, like who has those for me, and like really, there's like people waiting to like come work for you, and so I think being able to actually then share other opportunities with like them, of like other of my like founder friends and whatever, and like just being able to just be a bridge. So diversity is important.
Sure. So, there's kind of two sides of it. There's systemic barriers of getting into tech for, Black and brown people. But then there's also the intimidation factor of, even somebody sitting in listening to everything you're saying right now, they may be like, I can't do that, or this sounds like too much to me. What are some ways we can get individuals more interested and willing to, come in and indulge in the tech industry from your perspective?
Yeah, man, like honestly, just like jump in. Like I was one of those people too that was like, oh my God, tech, like it's so scary. But it's not, well, not that it's not, but like if you really think about it, every company is a tech company, kind of at this point, right? And it's just a matter of understanding. You don't have to know how to code and how to engineer to like be in tech, right? Like I don't know how to code. I've had to learn product management skills over time, just like managing a product company, right? But yeah, like you could be a marketer and be in tech. You could be a finance person and be in tech. You could be a legal person and be in tech. Like you could be a psychology major and be in tech and like do UI UX research. Like there's so many different ways to like come into it. And so I think definitely, you know, if you're kind of scared about tech, or maybe if you're like, hey, but I don't code, I don't want to learn how to code, just definitely be open-minded into exploring the different ways that you can get into tech. Because it's pretty skill agnostic for the most part. Most of it is more so just like a mental way of thinking. Um, yeah.
Great advice. So before we jump into the Q&A with the audience, is there anything that you would like to say to the audience? Any advice you would like to give, just from, you know, living your life, your experiences, working, your young life, just any advice that you have?
Yeah, man, just like do what you got to do for you. Honestly, that's like all that matters. Like if Collective died tomorrow, I'd be okay, you know, and I'd like go figure out the next thing, you know. So just try to like, I've tried to like not get identity and so caught up in like, you know, I'd be like dreaming about Collective like every day, and it's like, yo, like you are not allowed to have this space like while I'm dreaming Collective, you know, like just being real about like, you know, how are you able to show up for you so that you can continue to show up for what you're showing up for is super important. Like this stuff is fun for me, and I say to my team all the time, like y'all get scared when this is no longer fun. Like you know, like this it needs to be fun. So it's like I would much rather be like, yo, like it's Tuesday, like we're going to the beach today. Like I don't care, like let's go, like because that is fun for me right now. And like if like no one's going to die in that process, and like that's going to give me the energy to like show up into tomorrow. So I don't know, just being able to like be real about like what you need and understanding that like that's actually going to provide you so much more clarity and efficacy for what it is that you're actually doing and building, and not feeling guilty about being like needing to get what you need. But also I'm a 24-year-old who's single without kids and not married, and you know, no real responsibility. So I could also say that. But yeah, I think being able to just kind of create space for yourself is very important.
Great advice. Great advice. So now I wanted to open up the floor for any questions you may have for Kelsey based on what she just presented. You can drop questions in the chat and I'll relay them to her, or you can come off mute and ask her personally.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the ones that already dropped. How did I get connected with investors? A lot of it was through programs I was in. So whether that was like Techstars, the Launchpad, but then a lot of it was like literally just like cold emails, just like hopping on places like AngelList or Crunchbase or Signal, NFX, or just places and taking the stage of the company that you're in. So whether that's like pre-seed, seed, angel round, whatever, and then taking the category of focus that you're in. So whether that's like, you know, product utility, future of work, creator economy, right? Whatever area you fall in. And then trying to find investors that meet like that thesis. Most investors are really just philosophers with a lot of money. And so they kind of post these like theses, all right, or these theses or these hypotheses they have for what their future of the world looks like 10 years from now or 20 years from now, right? I believe in a world where yada, 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 yada. And so I want to invest in fintech and these types of companies and these types of companies that are focused in this. And I want them to be raising rounds anywhere between 500K and 2 million. And I'll invest check sizes between 100K and 500K. And I'll deploy 30 checks a year, right? There's oftentimes like that type of information that's like available to investors. And then for you, you kind of have to do that like math backwards of like, all right, like, do we kind of fall within their scope? Yeah. So that's what I'll say to that. And then have those accolades you've earned help you get access to funding opportunities? Yeah, for sure. Like I know we've put out like investor updates before that have been like, hey, we just got into Forbes, like respond to our email. That tends to work. And then like build new clients relationships. Yeah, like that's like more of like the customer validation side. So if you know you have, you know, some customer you're trying to go get and they're choosing between you and some other company, right, and they're seeing the traction you're getting and whatever, then whether it's true or not, they feel like they can somehow ride that wave, right? And so I think it definitely helps in that way. And
Reading
then
for you, Kelsey, so you could just focus on.
yeah, for sure.
Yep. So from Amelia, how is payment built into your platform currently, or future plans?
Yeah, so the way that it works right now is the way that creators get paid are through challenges. And so once the challenge winners get selected and notified, then they get like a email trigger basically that like they fill out this form that has like their payment processing information, and then they get paid out directly. That's the way that it works now, but we're definitely trying to like work better on continuing to automate those systems, make them faster, better, more efficient, that whole thing.
We have another question from Glenn. Is there anything that you would do differently knowing what you know now?
Of course, Glenn. I'm not a rock. Yeah, the goal is to always be learning, right? It's like, how could I take information? There are things I would have did this morning differently. Like, the way I crossed the street this morning probably would have been differently if I saw a car coming. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, I just try to always be aware of what's going on and how am I learning and just being honest with myself. And me and my co-founder, we have retrospectives every Saturday where basically like we do these walk and talks and we're just like honest with each other. Like, hey, like I didn't like when you cut me off in that meeting, or like, hey, like I'm concerned that our burn is not going to let us pay for rent next month. And like, I'm like just being very honest about like whatever the key issues are, because when you're able to be honest and transparent about what you don't know, then that gets you quicker to like solutions. And so I think that's also a cool thing about entrepreneurship. Like, maybe in like a regular job, like maybe you're afraid to tell your boss if something's going wrong or something, because like, I don't know, you don't know what's going to come from that. One entrepreneurship, like if you own the company, it's either you face yourself, right, and you're real about what problems exist, or you know that this is going to turn into a bigger problem that you are going to have to still be dealing with. So yeah, just trying to be honest with yourself there is just like super important. And I think being a good CEO, like the best CEOs and founders that I know are in therapy and have executive coaches and like are reading constantly and meditate every day. And like, there's just such a high level of like awareness that you have to have in order to lead a high growth startup. So for sure.
To follow up with that, Glenn had another question. Did or do you have any mentors that helped you achieve your success?
Yeah, for sure. Some of my mentors, a lot came from Syracuse. I talk to mentors probably like, I mean, at least twice a week, I would say, whether they're like mentors or advisors. And it could be directly related to the company or just like for my own life personally. But yeah, I think, I'm a young CEO and I lean into that, it's like, hey, like I'm 24, can you be my mentor? Like, and it's like you get free advice, and oftentimes you ask people for advice and they give you money. So that's cool too. Yeah.
We have another question from Max. Well, what do you look for when hiring new people?
Problem solving skills. I like people that like they see gaps, but they also see solutions. And I always say on our team, like the worst thing that you could ever do is surprise me. Like that's like the worst thing ever. So I think if you're the type of person who like you're quick to say what you don't know, right? Like you're able to say like, hey, like let's talk through this thing. Like people who are just like very like action oriented, especially as a startup. Everyone that you're hiring at the early stage really needs to have full autonomy over what they're doing, because like I can't really control what they're doing on a day-to-day. Like I'm focused on fundraising. Like you really need to be able to give people like autonomy over their thing to really like just build it. And so yeah, just people who are able to kind of have that natural ownership and who are just like natural go-getters, for sure.
Great question. We have another question from Aaron. How do you manage your stress?
Yeah, man. I meditate. I I sleep for 8 hours a day, every day. Um, I I'm a big stickler on my calendar. So like if it's not on my calendar, like it's probably not happening. And I think that that's just a good way to create transparency across the team. Like everyone in my life has my calendar. My girlfriend has my calendar. My parents have my calendar. My team has my calendar. Um, and so like I always tell people, look, you always have access to me. You have full access to me, like as long as it's on my calendar. And that's just like that's a thing for me, just to I don't know, because then I could look at it before the night. I know what's happening tomorrow. Like I could just prepare for it. And I think also as a CEO, I've had to learn how to like most of the day I'm in meetings, right? I'm doing things like this, talking in meetings, or I'm like showing up for other things. And oftentimes it'll be like 6 p.m. and I'll be like, dang, like, what did I get done today? Like, what work did I do that was like stuff on my to-do list that like I needed to get done? And not just like, oh, like somebody from my team hit me about this and a customer hit us about this. Like, what are like not inbound things that are happening, but like how am I controlling? And so, yeah, trying to do that too is super helpful. But yeah, that's something that's super, very important to me, like managing stress. Like my friends will probably tell you I'm actually one of the least stressed people probably that people know. Like I'm very, things don't really, I'm not very emotional when things happen that are like good or bad. I'm not very like swayed. Like, I don't know. I try to stay super zen. And that helps me stay sane. Yeah.
So we have another question from Erica. I work for the Science and Tech Entry Program STEP at SU. I work with students 7th to 12th grade. Did you have any influence or access to tech programs in high school that sparked your interest in this field? If not, what would you have liked to have access to in middle or high school that could have prepared you for your career?
That's a great question. I joke about this with my friends. I didn't know what computer science was until I was a sophomore in college. Like I literally didn't know what like obviously I knew what coding was like in theory. Like I knew like what it is, but I didn't really know what it meant. I didn't like when people were software engineers, okay, what are you building? Like I didn't know anything about databases. I didn't know anything about like yeah, and that was probably like 4 or 5 years ago. Now I run a tech company, so anyone can do it. But yeah, so I guess influences. I mean, we had like vocational programs in high school, and I do think that like computing or like engineering is probably one of them. But I know I took the video production one, so I wasn't in that. But definitely not in middle school. We didn't have that for sure. I also grew up in Georgia public schools, which aren't great. But yeah, I definitely think that yeah, if you can get access to tech programs, middle, high school, for sure. Like if you guys have kids, they need to be coding. Like period. Like if you have a fourth grader, they should be coding. Like yeah. So yeah, and I'm sure you guys can get like apps and stuff. Erica, I'm sure you know this way better than I do, but yeah.
We have any other questions? No pressure.
And it doesn't have to be directly about collective. It could be I'm thinking what's next. About what, Glenn? Are we going out, Glenn? What's next? No, I'm just playing. Man, I don't know. What's next is Q2, right? So we're wrapping up March right now. So we are in Q2 planning mode. So today I had my big meeting with the team where I essentially presented our Q2 OKRs, which are like our objectives and key results. So the things that we're trying to really accomplish over the next 3 months across product, sales, and community teams that exist on our team. And yeah, so that's one thing. We're also in the process of closing our fundraising round right now. And so we're raising $500,000 to keep building what we're building. And so we're in the process right now of closing that with investors over the next few weeks. And then, yeah, just trying to spend, that capital on getting towards product market fit in 2021. And yeah, just continuing to scale the company. I'm excited what's going to happen in the creator economy industry. Overall, I'm excited to see, as things start to pick back up in the world, I'm excited to see like what that does for the worker economy, the gig economy. I'm excited to see what's happening even from a legislative standpoint. I don't know if I'm excited. I'm curious to see what happens from a legislative standpoint about a lot of the stuff from like a tech regulation standpoint, workers comp type of regulation stuff. I'm excited to see what happens there because that's super relevant. Yeah.
How has COVID impacted working with your team and branching out?
I love working in COVID. That may sound super insensitive, but oh my God, like I love just being able to be at home and it's like I talked literally probably for like 6 hours a day, just like in meetings and stuff, like at minimum, just like not even work, just the talking part is probably 6 hours. And I don't know. Like I would much rather do it at home, honestly, than like sitting in an office. I have ADHD. That's like pretty significant. And so I think even just like working from home for me is helpful from like a focus routine level. I could kind of create autonomy over what that looks like for me. If I want to be in this room and then be in this room and walk around, like, I don't know, like I'm in my own space. I'm not bothering anyone. And
Right.
oftentimes that's my biggest issue. Like when I'm in work environments, it's like, I was the kid to be done with my work, and so now I'm bothering all the other kids in class, and like I'm just like being, an ADHD fourth grader. And so I think also just not being in an office environment is actually maybe better even for my team from a productivity standpoint. They don't know that, but I think that's a reality. I do think that the team, though, however, it would benefit them. Like some of our developers, like just developers working together, like while they're coding, like I know that's just helpful for work. Same thing with some people on our marketing team. Um, but yeah, also like operationally, being able to raise capital and not have to deploy that towards like office expenses is pretty great and ideal.
Great point.
And honestly, we're able to like provide our team almost like better benefits, if you will, like because of that, and actually being able to provide them stuff like work equipment, like certain benefits, just because we have more cash flow to do it. So like comp packs look like things that are actually probably better for the person, and not just things that are like, oh, we have a ping pong table. Um, so yeah, but
Zachary, for aspiring man, that was a lot of questions coming in. For aspiring managers in the IT field, what classes or certificates would you recommend taking to prepare them for a
I
managerial
have
position?
no idea, bro. 0%. Like I have no idea. I didn't go to school for coding. I don't know much about IT. Um, I know that when we hire and things that we're interested in from like I don't know, like names and certifications, but things that we need our product people to like really understand. Like I need you to like really understand agile like methodology, like Scrum, like super well. Um, especially if you want to like do something within like product management or like go on a dev, lead a product team to some degree. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't really know outside of that too much. I'm sure maybe someone like Erica could be helpful for you to answer that, but yeah, I'm not too sure, honestly. I would say if anything, get experience. Like go work with a startup or something. Like go like understand how to solve problems within that space, and anyone will hire you. That's what I say to any, like, all hires or like recruiters want from you, or like owners of companies or founders or CEOs, are like to make their life easier or to like solve stuff they don't know. So if you learn how to do that within an organization, you'll always have a job.
We have a question from Kara. What works around you? What workarounds have you found for the ADHD? And a lot of people think ADHD as just a barrier. Do you think there's ways you have found to make it work for you?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I actually I'll drop this book into Amazon really quick for you. I think it's called like ADHD as a superpower or something like that. But basically, I hold on real quick. Now I'm googling. Now I'm having an ADHD moment. Um, yeah, no, ADHD is something that's super real. And I think something that I think for me has been a blessing and a curse, right? I think if you're not aware of it and you don't know how to manage it, you're not on top of it, then you're probably going to be a very destructive human being to most spaces that you occupy in, right? Like you may just be super disruptive, like whatever. I think in the context of entrepreneurship, however, that could be great, right? Being able to be super like hyper impulsive, being able to think super quick, being able to switch on your feet well, being able to go from here to here to here, like all of that is super great. But imagine trying to lead a team and to create clarity and you're all over the place, right? That's not great, right? So being able to be super hyper intentional, because you know the way that your brain works and you know how you operate, being hyper focused on knowing how to slow down, knowing when to slow down, focus on breathing, right? Like all that, type of stuff I think is super important. Um, and like not being afraid to like lean in to it, right? I think me being able to actually accept the fact that I have ADHD made me be able to do more research into it and to meet other CEOs and founders who have it and to kind of find these like affinity circles around it. Um, so yeah, I think that it could be great as long as you don't run from it and you like lean into it, right? For sure.
Thank you, Kelsey. You're giving out a lot of free game.
Uh, Yeah, where will Collective be in 5 years? I see it. I don't know. I hope we're making a good 80 mil a year. Have like 50 million employees. I hope I'll be hiring another CEO around maybe that time, and be going and do the next thing, ideally.
I guess I can ask a follow-up question, something that stuck out to me. You said you get 8 hours of sleep every day. When someone asks, how do you manage your stress?
Yeah.
Um, do you wake up early? Because they say, all the successful
What's
people,
early,
uh,
Marcus?
three, it's different. You're in a different time. 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock.
Yeah, no, how do I sleep? So I try to be, I'm for sure in bed by 10, at worst 10:30, like in bed physically. And I'm definitely sleep by 10:30, 11, worst 11:30. And then I try to be up by like 6:37.
Six.
Um, I prefer when it's not daylight savings because I just wake up with the sun. Over the past week, I've been like waking up at 7:30 and I feel like a caveman. Like I'm like, oh my gosh, like why won't my body get up? I think normally like I just sleep, like I have my blinds open, like as soon as the sun's getting up around like 6:15, like I'm usually up. But I think over the past week it's been more challenging. And then it's crazy because my co-founder, he's like the opposite of me. He's like the night is his time and we live together, which is great, honestly. And so it's like we almost have this like yin and yang relationship with like sleep and stuff, which is kind of perfect. But yeah, that's important to me. And he's the type of person which I love. Like he'll kind of know, like if it's been 3 or 4 days and I'm starting to be cranky, he's like, yo, you've been meditating, bro. Like, yo, you've been, you know what I mean? Like, do you need a good 24? But that's good. That's why I love him, which is great. So.
Yeah. Leticia, and creating a new venture. Would you consider selling at some point and creating a new
Of
venture?
course. I think the cool thing in the beauty about entrepreneurship is that like the way that we see success with entrepreneurship is like, being able to build something that could exist without you, right? That's ultimately the goal, right? It's like raising a kid, right? Yeah, that's your baby, but like I mean, when they're 30, they've got to be out the crib. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, how do we make sure that we're able to pour into this thing, but so much so, and like train it so much so that we're able to walk away from it and it could thrive on its own. Right. So, yeah, that's definitely my goal. I want to pay all my investors back in the next 5 to 7 years. And there's only really 1 to 3 ways that happens. And it all has to do with, walking away. So that's definitely the goal for us. And in terms of next goals, like I want to get my PhD. I want to be a doctor in the next like 10 years or so. So not because it's like important as much as I'm just like a nerd and want to go study something else to go build something else probably. Uh, yeah.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Most people don't. It's kind of a secret. Don't
Yeah,
really.
I ain't
It's
gonna
yeah.
tell them.
It's like a.
Only 40 people in here heard it. uh, Leticia, what do you see in terms of climate of diversity and inclusion in tech?
I think that diversity and inclusion has to be a conversation right now in terms of this like whole sidecard thing. I really hope it becomes like the main thing. Like I just hope it becomes like I don't know, like do we talk about diversity in society or do we just talk about like okay, how are we now building a social program? Like how are we actually like I don't know, like it's not just about how are we putting these band-aids on top of like the issue. It's like no, how are we actually decentralizing things and like democratizing things from the bottom up? Um, but yeah, no, I mean, I think that it's only going to get more democratized. Um, but I mean, when you think about the wealth gap, that's probably only going to get worse too. So I think when I think about it, it's like okay, on one hand, I'm like, oh, diversity in tech is definitely going to get better, but at the same time, like rich people are going to get a lot richer. People who are probably already poor are probably going to get a lot poorer. And so I do think that like yeah, tech can be more diverse, but are we still creating wealth equality? Like is there a parallel synergy between bridging the wealth gap and bridging the diversity gap? And I'm not sure yet, but I hope so. So I think when I'm thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, the reason why I'm often like, ugh, I love all this, but like, where's the money at? Like, how are we, like Martin Luther King was murdered when he started talking about economic inclusion, right? So let's like have that conversation be around like economic inclusion in the context of diversity. Um, yeah.
Well, Kelsey, do you got anything else you just want to, say before we depart to the group?
No, you guys are great. I'm super available on like LinkedIn, Twitter. You could find me. So yeah, I want to just continue to be a resource to the Syracuse. I'll always, rep Cuse no matter where I am. And so yeah, I'm just excited to be able to be here and support the work that Center State CEO is doing. Marcus, I'd love to see you grow over the years too. Me and Marcus went to school together. So yeah, it was just cool. Also, kind of going from being friends in class, seeing him also kind of scale through Center State and what I'm doing too. So yeah, I mean, you keep up the good work too, Marcus. Let me
Appreciate
know
it.
when you're in LA.
Appreciate it. Got you. So I wanted to say thank you everyone for coming to tonight's event. Thank you, Kelsey, for, enlightening everyone and, dropping those jewels. We appreciate it. If you want access to any resources, you can visit the Center State CEO website, the same place where you registered for this event. For any upcoming events, the same location. You can also engage with us on social media, Center State CEO, Instagram and Facebook, also Generation Next. And if you have any questions on how to get involved with tech and culture going forward, you can reach out to the email that's on this slide, Generation Next at Center State CEO. All right, everyone. Appreciate you coming out tonight. Have a great one.
Awesome. Thank you guys.